Hello, everybody, and welcome to another transfer rumor special. As Derby have been linked with a Middlesbrough midfielder named Dan Barlaser. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that. I'll be told because with Jack and I this evening is Johnny Bullock from the Borough Breakdown. Johnny, thanks for joining us. I would say it's been a while, but we've just talked Matt Clark. So thanks for sticking with us and not departing on Zoom Part 2, which occasionally a guest has done now and then. But thanks so much for joining us.
I remember a couple of years ago, Cara, we did have to do the part two because we just couldn't stop talking, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
exactly, exactly. Um, Johnny, Jack, I remember Don. I am going to butcher his name at least once in this video, and I already apologize. I remember Don. I'm calling him Don, and his name is Dan. Like that's not even the hard part of his name. Dan Barlaser. I remember him playing Jack for Accrington Stanley in the FA Cup third round under Frank Lampard was the manager for Derby. Derby wore those kind of cool gray kits, and that was the game that Mason Mount got injured in with his hamstring that ended up doing us at the end of the season. Um, but I remember him playing for Accrington, and you're like, this guy is running the show. And I kind of not kept like two eyes on him, but I've kind of like seen him out the years, and he's joined Middlesbrough. He's doing okay, and Johnny's going to tell us more about this. Um, Johnny, talk to me about Dan Barlaser. He's a midfielder, right, for Middlesbrough.
he is. Yeah, it's cracking me up that you are so close to butchering when you're butchering the easy part. The, yeah, Dan Barlaser, he's an interesting midfielder to bring in. He is someone who previously was more offensive minded, and we've slowly brought him back into a more of a defensive role, which has impacted his output from like a goals and assist standpoint, right? But he is someone who is comfortable on the ball, good in threading the ball. He has probably one of the best long balls I've seen in the division. He's so accurate with that and he's able to create opportunities from it. Him in Middlesbrough's side, I just don't think it's really fit. But that doesn't mean someone is a bad player. I just don't think that the system that what we wanted to play has really showcased Dan Barlas's strengths, and that is all around progressive passes. It's all about finding a good bit of space and also trying to find an opening from left or to the left or the right, and he can 100% do it. I think what his move has shown this season is just his defensive shortcomings. He's just not that type of player, but he is very luxurious on the ball. He will create a lot of openings. A lot. He's probably one of the best crosses I've seen. But don't put him on a corner. But I can come on to that a little bit later on. But I think it's a really solid signing. It's something that's going to add quality and add more layers to Derby's team. And he's a player who I think will create more openings for Derby and help yourself get with chance creation. So that's what I think you're going to get from Dan Barlaser. But I wouldn't be too hung up on some of the defensive numbers that you see from him just due to how he was played.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of just having players do what they do best. We've got Ibu Adams to kind of do the defensive dirty work and go box to box and allow players to be the best versions of themselves. And Jack, this very much seems like Darby were linked earlier in the window, and we put a video out earlier about Oscar Froilo, a midfielder at FC Utrecht, who, his time had kind of dropped with Utrecht because they're doing so well in the era of Dizzy. But he also seemed like that progressive passer, and it's kind of seems to be something that Derby need. We have Kenzo Houtmine, who has been okay so far, not outstanding and not terrible, but he's been okay. And it seems like we really are in the mood for that kind of progressing passing midfielder. And it seems like Dan Barlaser just he fits that bill.
100%. I mean, if there's one thing that Johnny's learned about me uh, throughout talking about these signings, it's my FD ref prediction. But I will just give you, as you talk about progressive passes, the stat. Dan Barlaser, so it's not that hard, 7.16 per 90. So that again puts him in the 87th percentile compared to leagues similar to the Championship. However, they calculate that. 98% off of passes attempted, 81.96 per 90 as well. So lots of passes is another thing to note. I mean, I was doing some research earlier into kind of how he's been at Borough, but also how Paul Warne used him at Rotherham. because I think that's an interesting thing to look back on. And I think, there's been a lot of complaints from Derby fans about the couple of players that Paul Warne has signed that he had at Rotherham. Connor Washington, Josh Vickers, and then Jerry Yates, who he actually shipped out from Rotherham. And this is not just another one of the old band getting back together. This is a player who at Middlesbrough now has developed some real, again, championship experience, knows the division, and has held his own at this level. I mean, I remember watching him for Rotherham and thinking, he stands out. He was a real linchpin in that midfield. And I think it's a really interesting signing for Derby in that respect. Whether he slots in next to Ebu Adams, or whether he's the deeper player and sort of playing that Ben Osborne role, but available more consistently, trying to kind of create from deep and dictate the play, that remains to be seen. But I think next to somebody like Ebu Adams, who can do a lot of the running, a lot of the dirty work, it's going to be really interesting, because I think compared to Kenzo, you've got a guy who's ready-made for the division and maybe that bit stronger.
And Jack, when you look at this, and Johnny, I'm sure you'll attest to this as well, that even playing from a deeper position, it might not be the best version of himself. But if you're looking for someone who can spray passes, and I'm not going to say dictate play, but maybe dictate play a little bit in the tempo of the game with stringing passes together, things like that, you can play that player as a 6 and a partner as a defensive midfielder, or you can play him further front. And so it gives Derby a little bit of versatility in midfield that maybe they've lacked due to, the unavailability of certain players, Jack, or having to swap people around due to different things. So it does seem quite a good move, especially if we want to, I don't know, do something drastic like playing down the middle of the pitch. What a surprise that would be, because we just don't play down the middle of the pitch, John. It's like we just have to play it wide. Like you can't go down. I don't know. I think the ground's been said like you can't go down the middle, and so we just, yes sir, we won't do that. You touched on it a little bit, Johnny, but strengths of Dan Barlaser.
Yeah, definitely his passing. And I think what Jack was alluding to there, where he would fit, I think Ebu Adams is probably the best partner that he would get. I think in Derby's side at the moment, someone who can do the dirty work, gives him the space to play. That's where you see the best out of him. If I could translate that from like a Middlesbrough perspective, he was playing a lot better when he was next to Johnny Howson or Aidan Morris, who has been our best signing by a country mile. He's been excellent. And his big strengths, his super strengths, definitely his passing, his free kick ability to whip the ball in the box. His corners will always go to the keeper's hands, so don't put him on that. But for the strengths wise, yeah, it's all about possession play and how he's really neat and tidy, and he's able to create openings. And he's only really had one amazing moment, which I love at Borough and QPR this season. I hope you guys see it. But he opens his ball up and just whips it bottom corner, and it's just such a beautiful goal, because he would do that quite regularly for Rotherham, but he just didn't do it here just due to where he was playing. But it's all about passing with him. Like, I know some Borough fans might call him bad passer because, he attempts a lot and sometimes they don't always come off, but at least he tries the pass, which will create the opening rather than not passing at all. So I think that's where his biggest strengths are. But also, I think he's a good culture fit. I think he's, from all I've ever heard from him, is being really positive, really good player to have around the team. Bit of a joke if I was speaking to Matt Crooks about this, and he's his best friend, so he was saying how much they get on, and how much of a great person he is to have around the team. So yeah, there's a lot of really things to like about this signing. He adds more quality, and similarly with the Matt Clark signing, you're adding more quality to the group, which helps benefit the cause to stay in the division. Those two players will really add value for Derby and will definitely help keep you in the division.
Johnny, with just a few minutes left, we're going to talk about weaknesses in a minute, but
Yeah.
I always like a player who's willing to take a risk and to pass it, because
100%.
oftentimes today you watch football and no one wants to take a player on and they don't want to do a forward pass. I'd rather give it to my teammate, let them take the risk and whatever. And I think if you do have a player who can ping balls and see something that's maybe not there or something, it adds a bit of excitement to the crowd, and again can open up a gap somewhere else for something else to happen. And then one more time before we go to weaknesses, Johnny, how long's left on his Middlesbrough contract? Is this a loan to just get him out the club, or is this like a loan to his kind of time at Middlesbrough has run its course kind of thing? Or does he
I
have a
wouldn't.
future at Borough?
He definitely has a future, but I wouldn't be shocked if this was a permanent. I wouldn't be shocked. I know obviously that with contracts and you can say it's initial loans, but we've been really surprised where people have went out on permanent deals, and he's a player that needs to play. So I wouldn't be shocked if he had been accepted, and I wouldn't be shocked if it was a permanent deal. I really wouldn't be. He definitely has a future at Middlesbrough, but I think it's going a little bit stale. So this move will do him a world of good. And if it's a permanent deal, I think you've got a really good player there who can comfortably be the best player in League One if you went down, and also in this division, a really solid signing.
And he's not old. He's not, necessarily a
Yeah.
spring chicken, but he's kind of in those prime years of his career. It's not like we're getting someone who's, 45 and with one leg and stuff, kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, kind of panic buying. Johnny, I promised I would get to weaknesses, and I've held you off long enough. You talked about his defensive frailties, probably because that's not his best position, is a stopper and in front of the center halves. What are the areas of improvement or the weaknesses in Dan Barlaser's game? I'm gonna get it. I don't know why I'm tripping over that.
You've nailed it. You've been so hung up on the Dan bit. His weaknesses, very bluntly, he just doesn't work as a defensive midfielder. It's he needs someone to do that dirty work around him. We've seen from this season when he played with Hayden Hackney, they just didn't go together. It's like that pizza and ice cream. You like both, but they don't. It doesn't work, does it? Right? So defensively, he can get caught up in possession because he can spend too much time on it. But the reason why he does is just due to how Borough play, and they can be quite slow, and he's trying to wait for that right moment and then gets the ball nicked. That's a weakness which I think he needs to improve on. But defensively, yeah, he's just not that type of player to get stuck in, really. He's more of a player that you can always argue be a luxury player, someone who is you can have him in the team and people can do the dirty work because he can give you that outlet or can give you that moment of brilliance. So that's where I would say his weaknesses are. It's more the defensive work, but it's very intriguing to see how he plays. If you've got Adams there doing all that work, then I think he'd be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I mean, I would let him just do what he needs to do and let, Ibu Adams do what he does. And I think they will complement each other very, very well. Again, Johnny, you've warmed me up a little bit because I'm kind of excited about this signing, despite the fact I cannot pronounce the easiest part of his name. I can do Barlasser. That's easy. But whether it's Don or Dan or whatever his name is, but Dan Barlaser, it's an exciting signing, and it should be good, and we'll see how it progresses. But
Oh,
Jack, please.
one fun fact before we go. I only learnt this earlier. Dan Barlaser played for Turkey's under-16s and under-17s, eligible through his father. You wouldn't expect that from a former Rotherham, Accrington, and Borough player who's just been in the FL journeyman.
Fair enough. That's again, Jack the Stat Man back with us again. But Johnny Bullock from the Borough Breakdown. Johnny, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Corey. Thanks for having me on again.